Commander Vexthal stood in the control room of his massive warship, looking at the blue planet on the screen. His 4 arms moved over the control panel as he read the data about the creatures living on that world. The planet was called Earth, by its people, who called themselves humans. Vexthal's mouth parts clicked together as he read the reports. These humans were weak, divided, and backward. The Corvanian Empire had been watching Earth for many cycles. Their spy ships had collected information about human weapons, ships, and armies. Everything they learned told the same story. Humans were primitive. They still used chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. Their weapons fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. Their ships were slow and clumsy compared to Corvanian vessels. "Look at this," Vexthal said to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kraltos. "These humans fight each other constantly. They have hundreds of different nations, all arguing and fighting. They cannot even agree on simple things like trade or borders." Kraltos moved closer to the screen. His green skin reflected the blue light from the planet display. "Their weapons are ancient, Commander. We detected nuclear missiles, but they are slow and easy to stop. Their largest warships are smaller than our smallest scout craft." Vexthal felt confident. The Corvanian Empire had conquered 47 worlds. Each conquest had been swift and clean. Most species surrendered when they saw the size of the Corvanian fleet. Those who fought were crushed within days. The humans would be no different. "How many ships do they have?" Vexthal asked. "Their space. Forces are tiny," Kraltos replied. "They have a few small stations orbiting their planet. Maybe 20 ships capable of leaving their atmosphere. Most of their military is still stuck on the planet's surface." The commander looked at his own fleet. 215 ships of various sizes surrounded his command vessel. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a human city. The smallest Corvanian fighter was faster and stronger than anything humans had built. The largest dreadnoughts could destroy entire human fleets with a single shot. "Send the advanced scouts," Vexthal ordered. "Let them see what real power looks like." On Earth, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat in a bunker deep under a mountain. Alarms were ringing throughout the facility. The screens around him showed the approaching alien fleet. For 3 days, every telescope and radar station on Earth had been tracking the ships. The aliens made no effort to hide their approach. "How many ships?" asked General Lisa Hayes as she walked into the command center. 215 confirmed, Morrison replied. "Maybe more following behind. Their technology is far beyond ours, General. Our best missiles can't even scratch their shields." President William Carter appeared on the main screen via video link. His face was grim. "What are our options?" General Hayes looked at the data scrolling across her screens. "We tried launching nuclear missiles at their scout ships. The missiles exploded harmlessly against some kind of energy barrier. Our space stations reported the same thing. Their weapons go right through our armor like it's not even there." Morrison pulled up tactical displays showing human military assets. "Around the globe, we have maybe 3 million active military personnel worldwide. But most of our equipment is designed for fighting other humans, not aliens with energy weapons and force fields." "What about civilian populations?" the president asked. "Evacuation is impossible," Hayes answered. "We have 7 billion people and nowhere to put them. Even if we could move everyone, these aliens can track us from space." The first alien attack came without warning. 3 Corvanian destroyers dropped out of hyperspace above major military bases. Their weapons carved through concrete and steel like a hot knife through butter. The human defenders fired everything they had. Bullets, rockets, and missiles filled the air. Nothing worked. At Peterson Air Force Base, Colonel Ryan Clark watched his fighters explode one by one as they tried to engage the alien ships. The enemy weapons were too fast and too powerful. Human pilots who had trained for years died in seconds. "This is impossible," Clark radioed to his remaining pilots. "Fall back to Rally Point 7. But Captain Amy Rodriguez refused to retreat. She flew her F-35 fighter directly at the alien destroyer. Her missiles had no effect, but she kept flying. At the last second, she ejected from her aircraft and watched it crash into the alien ship's engine. The explosion was small, but it caused the alien vessel to wobble. Did you see that?" Rodriguez radioed as she parachuted down. "The ship shook. When my fighter hit it, their shields stop energy weapons, but maybe not physical impact." Commander Vexthal received the first battle reports with amusement. The humans had lost every engagement. Their weapons were useless against Corvanian technology. Their ships were destroyed before they could even get close to his vessels. Everything was going according to plan. "How many human casualties?" he asked. "Approximately 1,200 in the first strikes," reported his intelligence officer. Human. Military response was exactly as predicted. They used conventional tactics against the superior technology. Vexthal expected surrender demands from the human governments within hours. Every other species had quickly realized the hopelessness of their situation. The smart ones negotiated terms. The stubborn ones died quickly. But the humans did something unexpected. They kept fighting. Reports came in from around the planet. Human soldiers were regrouping instead of surrendering. Their leaders were coordinating instead of fleeing. Most strange of all, human civilians were joining the fight instead of hiding. "I don't understand," Kraltos said as he read the intelligence reports. "These humans know they cannot win. Why do they continue to resist?" Vexthal studied the data carefully. In his experience, inferior species either surrendered quickly or died quickly. The humans were doing neither. They were adapting, learning, changing their tactics based on what they observed in battle. A human scientist named Dr. Susan Grant had somehow managed to scan Corvanian ships during the attacks. Instead of evacuating, she stayed at her research station and collected data about alien technology. Her broadcasts were being received by human military forces worldwide. "The aliens use energy shields," Grant reported over radio. "But the shields seem designed to stop energy weapons, not physical objects. Try kinetic attacks. Use mass and speed instead of explosives." Vexthal realized something disturbing. The humans were not just fighting randomly. They were studying his forces and sharing information. In less than one day, they had figured out a potential weakness in Corvanian defenses. "Commander," Kraltos said urgently, "we're receiving reports from our ground forces. The humans are using some kind of new tactic." On the screen, Vexthal watched video from a Corvanian landing party. Human soldiers were firing their primitive weapons not at the aliens, but at the ceiling above them. The bullets ricocheted off metal beams and struck the Corvanians from unexpected angles. The aliens' personal shields were designed to stop direct attacks, not random debris. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vexthal felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. These humans were supposed to be simple, primitives. Instead, they were proving to be dangerously clever. The 3-day conquest was already taking longer than expected, and the humans were just getting started. Commander Vexthal stared at the reports flowing across his screen. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began. 3 weeks when it should have been 3 days. The humans were not behaving like any species he had encountered before. "Sir, we have another problem," Lieutenant Kraltos said as he entered the command center. His voice carried a tone that Vexthal had never heard before. "Fear. What now?" Vexthal demanded. The humans boarded the cruiser Silent Death. A human female led the attack. She used nothing but converted mining ships and industrial explosives. Captain Zolther is dead. The entire crew is dead. Vexthel's forearms went still. That's impossible. The Silent Death has the best shields in the fleet. How did primitive humans get through our defenses? Kraltos pulled up security footage from the destroyed cruiser. The screen showed a human female in crude armor, leading a small group of soldiers through the ship's corridors. She moved with purpose and intelligence, not the random panic Vexthul expected from an inferior species. Her name is Captain Amy Rodriguez, Kraltos explained. She somehow calculated the exact moment when our shields would recalibrate between energy pulses. The humans flew their ships through that tiny gap. The footage showed Rodriguez and her team fighting through the ship. They used weapons that were obviously improvised. Modified mining tools, welding torches, and industrial chemicals. But they fought with a coordination that impressed even Vexthul. Look at this part, Kraltos said, advancing the video. When they reached the reactor room, 3 of her soldiers stayed behind to hold off our security forces. They knew they would die, but they did it anyway. Vexthul watched the 3 human soldiers position themselves in a narrow corridor. They had no chance of survival, but they fought anyway. When the Corvanian security forces finally overwhelmed them, the humans had bought Rodriguez enough time to plant her explosives. Why? Vexthul asked. Why would they sacrifice themselves for others? I don't know, Commander, but it gets worse. Kraltos showed reports from other battles. A human soldier named Sergeant Kevin Walsh had somehow infiltrated a Corvanian shield generator station. Instead of trying to escape with intelligence, he had detonated explosives that destroyed the entire facility. The explosion took out the shields protecting an entire battle group. He killed himself to damage our equipment, Kraltos explained. One human, acting alone, disabled 12 of our warships. More reports followed. Human soldiers were throwing themselves at Corvanian positions with no regard for their own safety. But these were not random suicide attacks. Each action was carefully planned to cause maximum damage to alien forces. Captain Lavra Stone had held off an entire Corvanian landing. Party with nothing but projectile weapons and determination. She had given her civilians time to escape, then activated some kind of explosive device that killed herself and 20 Corvanian soldiers. They fight like demons, reported Sub-Commander Thargos over the communication link. But intelligent. Demons. This human female knew exactly where to position herself for maximum effect. She studied our movement patterns and used our own tactics against us. Vexthul felt something cold in his chest. The humans were not just brave. They were learning. Every battle taught them something new about Corvanian weaknesses. And they were sharing this knowledge across their entire species. Dr. Susan Grant had continued broadcasting technical data about Corvanian equipment, even as plasma fire consumed her research facility. Her last transmission contained detailed information about alien shield frequencies and weapon patterns. Within hours, human forces around the planet were using this information to plan better attacks. Commander, his intelligence officer called out, "We're intercepting human communications. They're coordinating their attacks globally." The screen showed a map of Earth with communication links connecting every continent. The humans had somehow managed to create a unified command structure despite their previous divisions. How is this possible? Vexthul asked. Our intelligence showed they were divided into hundreds of separate nations. They were, the intelligence officer confirmed, but now they're working together. A human leader called General Lisa Hayes has convinced their governments to share all military resources and information. Vexthul studied the communication patterns. The humans were not just sharing information. They were actively learning from each other's successes and failures. When one human unit discovered a new weakness in Corvanian armor, every other human unit knew about it within hours. The tactical displays showed human forces adapting their strategies in real time. A group led by Lieutenant Danny Foster had discovered that Corvanian engines were vulnerable to kinetic impacts. Within 6 hours, human pilots around the world were using ramming attacks against alien ships. They're turning their technological disadvantage into an advantage, Vexthul realized. Our shields are designed to stop advanced energy weapons, but humans are using primitive kinetic attacks that our systems don't recognize as threats. The reports kept coming. Human civilians were joining the fight alongside their military. A woman named Jennifer Wells had destroyed a Corvanian patrol using improvised chemical weapons after they threatened her children. An elderly man called George Clark had used his knowledge of local terrain to lead an entire Corvanian battalion into a trap. They're not fighting like soldiers, Kratos observed. They're fighting like a whole species defending their home. Vexthul began reviewing human military history. What he found disturbed him deeply. These creatures had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had developed strategies for every possible type of warfare. Guerrilla tactics, urban combat, psychological warfare, economic warfare. They had perfected the art of conflict. "Look at this," he said to his staff. "The humans have a concept called total war. They're willing to sacrifice everything, including their own infrastructure, to defeat an enemy." The screen showed reports of humans destroying their own cities rather than let Corvanian forces occupy them. They were denying resources to the aliens even at the cost of their own people. Major Alan Thompson had convinced an entire city to evacuate, then detonated nuclear charges that destroyed the urban center along with the Corvanian forces. Trying to secure it, the humans called it scorched earth tactics. "They're making this planet worthless to us," Vexthul said. "If they can't win, they'll make sure we can't benefit from victory." The psychological warfare was the worst part. The humans had somehow figured out how to maximize the emotional impact of their attacks. They weren't just trying to destroy Corvanian equipment. They were trying to break Corvanian will to fight. Captain Maria Santos had been captured during a raid on a Corvanian supply depot. Under interrogation, she had provided false information that led an entire division into an ambush. When the trap was sprung, she had smiled at her captors and said, "You should have killed me when you had the chance." "Commander," Fargos reported from the surface, "the humans have a new tactic. They're using their own dead as weapons." The report showed human soldiers rigging their fallen comrades with explosives. When Corvanian forces approached to examine the bodies, the traps would detonate. It was psychologically devastating to troops who had never encountered such tactics. Vexthul realized that his forces were not just fighting an enemy. They were fighting an entire species that had evolved for warfare. Every human, from soldier to civilian, was part of a vast military machine that had been refined over millennia of conflict. "How many casualties have we taken?" he asked. 30% of our forces are dead or wounded," Kratos reported. "Morale is declining rapidly. The troops are requesting reinforcements." For the first time in his military career, Commander, Vexthul began to doubt victory. The humans were not just resisting, they were winning. Commander Vexthul watched the tactical display with growing horror. The humans had stopped trying to fight Corvanian technology with their own primitive weapons. Instead, they were doing something far more dangerous. They were thinking. "Sir, we have a problem," Lieutenant Kratos said as he rushed into the command center. "The humans just destroyed 3 of our ground installations using their communication satellites." Vexthul stared at the report. "That's impossible. They're satellites. Our civilian equipment. They have no weapons." "They turned them into weapons," Kratos explained. "A human engineer named Paul Carter figured out how to crash the satellites into our bases. They're using orbital speed as a weapon." The display showed the attack in detail. The humans had somehow calculated the exact trajectory needed to drop their satellites onto Corvanian positions. The metal debris struck with the force of massive bombs, but the aliens' shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not chunks of metal traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. How did they think of this? Vexthol demanded. It gets worse, Commander. They're sharing this technique with every human military unit on the planet. We're tracking 47 more satellites being moved into attack positions. Vexthol felt his confidence cracking. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever weaponized their own civilian infrastructure. The humans were turning everything they owned into potential weapons. Reports flooded in from around the planet. Human pilots were flying there. Atmospheric aircraft directly into Corvanian ship engines. The aliens called these kamikaze attacks, referencing some ancient human tactic. Lieutenant Danny Foster had flown his fighter jet into the intake of a Corvanian destroyer, causing a chain reaction that destroyed the entire vessel. They're killing themselves to hurt us, Kraltos observed. But it's working. We've lost 12 ships to these suicide attacks. The tactical display showed more disturbing developments. Colonel Lisa Park had convinced an entire human city to become living decoys. While Corvanian forces attacked the obvious targets, the real human military had flanked the alien positions and destroyed 3 landing zones. They're using their own civilians as bait, Vexthol said. And the civilians are agreeing to it. The psychology reports are even worse, Kraltos added. Our interrogation specialists can't break human prisoners. They seem to view torture as just another challenge to overcome. Vexthol pulled up the interrogation files. A human soldier named Captain Steve Johnson had been captured after holding off an entire Corvanian platoon for 6 hours. Under questioning, he had provided false information that led to the ambush of 2 more Corvanian units. When confronted with proof of his lies, he had simply smiled and said, "You should have killed me faster." The most disturbing report came from the Psychological Warfare Division. Mindshaper Kraldos had attempted to break human morale by targeting their families and children. The strategy had backfired completely. Instead of surrendering, they became more violent, Kraldos reported. A human female named Jennifer Wells created chemical weapons in her kitchen after we threatened her offspring. She killed an entire patrol using household cleaning products. Vexthol reviewed the incident. The human had somehow mixed common chemicals to create a poisonous gas that bypassed Corvanian atmospheric filters. She had then lured the patrol into an enclosed space and triggered the trap. How did she know our filters wouldn't work? Vexthol asked. She didn't, Kraldos replied. She tried 12 different combinations until she found one that worked. She was willing to risk her own life repeatedly to find our weakness. The reports showed a pattern that chilled Vexthol to his core. The humans were not just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with their minds. Every failure taught them something new. Every defeat gave them information for the next attack. Dr. Hayes had somehow analyzed Corvanian behavior patterns and was advising human forces on psychological warfare tactics. The constant, unpredictable human attacks were designed not just to cause physical damage, but to destroy alien morale. They're studying us, Vexthol realized. They're learning how we think, how we react, how we fight. And they're using that knowledge against us. The intelligence reports showed humans capturing Corvanian equipment whenever possible. But they weren't just using the alien technology. They were improving it. Chief Engineer Robert Kim had modified, captured plasma weapons to be more efficient than the original designs. Look at this, Kraltos said, showing a technical analysis. The humans took our weapon designs and made them better. They're using our own technology against us, but with superior tactics. The tactical displays showed human forces led by Admiral Helen Cross somehow managing to coordinate attacks across multiple continents. They had figured out how to predict Corvanian movements and were setting elaborate traps. "They're thinking faster than we are," Vexthil admitted. "Every time we change our tactics, they've already adapted to the change." The most terrifying example came from human strategist Colonel Patricia Davis. She had begun predicting Corvanian battle plans with frightening accuracy. Her forces were always in the right place at the right time, as if she could read alien minds. How does she do it? Vexthil asked his intelligence staff. "She's identified patterns in our behavior," came the reply. "Corvanian military doctrine follows established procedures. The humans have figured out our rules and are using them against us." The display showed Davis's latest victory. She had predicted exactly where Corvanian forces would establish their next base and had pre-positioned explosives in the area. When the aliens arrived, they walked directly into a trap that had been set 3 days earlier. "She's not just reacting to our moves," Vexthil said. "She's anticipating them." The breaking point came when human forces began using swarm tactics. General Michael Brooks had coordinated an attack using hundreds of small civilian aircraft against 3 Corvanian dreadnoughts. The aliens' point defense systems were designed to stop large threats, not swarms of tiny targets. "They're like insects," reported the captain of the destroyed dreadnought Pride of Corvax. "Individually weak, but collectively overwhelming. They just kept coming, no matter how many we destroyed." The human pilots had shown no fear of death. They flew their fragile aircraft directly into Corvanian gun positions, shields, generators, and engine intakes. Each individual attack caused minimal damage, but hundreds of attacks together brought down ships that should have been indestructible. "They're not fighting like any species we've encountered," Vexthil told his staff. "They're fighting like a force of nature. You can't negotiate with a hurricane or reason with an earthquake." The final straw came when human forces, led by Admiral Sandra Lewis, successfully boarded Vexthil's flagship. Using a combination of captured alien technology and human tactical innovation, they had somehow breached the ship's defenses. "All security teams to the command deck," Vexthil ordered as alarms sounded throughout the ship. "They're inside." The security cameras showed human soldiers fighting through the ship's corridors. They moved with deadly efficiency, using improvised weapons and tactics that Corvanian defenders couldn't counter. A human soldier named Sergeant Peter Clark fought with nothing but a metal pipe and unlimited determination, defeating 3 Corvanian warriors in powered armor. "They're not just brave," Kraltos observed as they watched the fighting. "They're smart. Look how they're using the ship's layout against us." The humans had somehow obtained blueprints of the Corvanian flagship and were using their knowledge of the ship's design to set ambushes. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. "Prepare the evacuation pods," Vexthil ordered. "We're abandoning ship." As he fled his own flagship, Vexthil realized the horrible truth. The humans had not just defeated his invasion. They had turned his own vessels into weapons against him. The ship that had been the pride of the Corvanian fleet was now a human. Victory. The last thing he saw before his escape pod launched was a human soldier, smiling as he activated explosives that would destroy the ship's reactor. The human knew he would die, but he also knew his sacrifice would save his comrades. Vexthil finally understood what made humans so terrifying. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to ensure their species survived, no matter the cost to themselves. Commander Vexthil floated in his escape pod, watching his flagship burn in the darkness of space. 2 months had passed since the invasion began. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare that violated every rule of warfare he had ever learned. His communication device crackled with desperate reports from across the planet. The humans had done something unthinkable. They were using their own nuclear weapons against themselves to deny territory to the Corvanian forces. "Commander," came the voice of Ground Marshal Thoskar, "the humans have destroyed another of their own cities." General Benjamin Carter ordered nuclear strikes on his own position to eliminate our forward base. Vexthul stared at the tactical display showing the radioactive crater where the human city of Detroit had been. The Corvanian ground forces had been establishing a major staging area there when the nuclear missiles struck. The humans had killed their own people to deny the aliens a strategic advantage. "How many human casualties?" Vexthul asked. "Approximately 800,000 civilians," Thoskar reported. "But they also eliminated 3,000 of our troops and destroyed our entire supply depot." The mathematics of the exchange horrified Vexthul. The humans were willing to sacrifice nearly 1 million of their own people to kill 3,000 aliens. No rational species would make such a trade. "They're not thinking like soldiers," Vexthul realized. "They're thinking like a species fighting for survival." More reports flooded in. The humans had developed what they called scorched earth tactics. Instead of allowing Corvanian forces to benefit from captured territory, they were systematically destroying everything of value. Major Lisa Park had overseen the destruction of an entire industrial region, denying the aliens access to human manufacturing capabilities. "They're making this planet worthless to us," Lieutenant Kraltos observed from another escape pod. "If they can't win, they'll make sure we can't benefit from victory." The tactical display showed human forces retreating from major cities, but not before destroying power plants, factories, and transportation networks. A human engineer named Robert Kim had somehow rigged an entire electrical grid to explode when Corvanian forces tried to use it. "They're destroying their own civilization," Vexthul said in disbelief. "They're choosing to live in ruins rather than under our rule." The reports from the Psychological Warfare Division made the situation even worse. Mindshaper Kraldos had attempted to break human morale by targeting their families and children. Instead of surrendering, the humans had become more dangerous. A human female named Jennifer Wells created improvised explosive devices after we threatened her offspring. Kraldos reported she killed herself and took down an entire patrol. Her final words were, "You should not have touched my children." Vexthul reviewed the incident footage. The human woman had somehow converted household chemicals into powerful explosives. She had then lured a Corvanian patrol into her home and detonated the devices, knowing she would die in the explosion. She chose death over submission, Vexthul observed, and she took as many of us with her as possible. The pattern was repeating across the planet. Human civilians were joining the fight with a ferocity that matched their military forces. An elderly man named George Clark had used his knowledge of local mining operations to bury an entire Corvanian battalion under a controlled avalanche. A teacher named Susan Grant had convinced her students to help build improvised weapons before leading them in an attack on a Corvanian supply convoy. "They're not fighting as individuals," Kraltos realized. "Every human is part of a collective defense. They're like cells in a single organism, all working together to destroy foreign invaders." The most disturbing development came from human forces led by Admiral Sandra Lewis. They had somehow managed to capture and reverse engineer Corvanian technology within weeks of first encountering it. But the humans didn't just copy alien designs. They improved them. "Look at this technical analysis," Vexthul said, displaying the data. "The humans took our plasma weapon designs and made them 30% more efficient. They're using our own technology against us, but with better engineering." The intelligence reports showed human scientists working around the clock to understand alien equipment. Dr. Richard Hayes had somehow figured out how Corvanian shields worked and was developing countermeasures. Engineer Paul Carter had modified captured alien ships to be faster and more maneuverable than the originals. They're learning faster than we can adapt, Vexthul admitted. Every piece of equipment we lose teaches them something new. The breaking point came when human strategist Colonel Patricia Davis began predicting Corvanian moves with uncanny accuracy. Her forces were always in the right place at the right time, as if she could read alien minds. She's identified patterns. In our behavior, the intelligence officer reported, Corvanian military doctrine follows established procedures. The humans have figured out our rules and are using them against us. The tactical display showed Davis's latest victory. She had predicted exactly where Corvanian reinforcements would land and had pre-positioned nuclear mines in the area. When the alien dropships arrived, they flew directly into a trap that had been set a week earlier. She's not just reacting to our moves, Vexthul said. She's anticipating them several steps ahead. The situation became critical when human forces began using coordinated swarm attacks. Captain Steve Johnson had somehow convinced thousands of human civilians to participate in simultaneous attacks across multiple continents. The aliens found themselves fighting on hundreds of fronts at once. They're like a plague, reported Captain Zorthic from the surface. Every time we eliminate one group, 3 more appear. They're using their superior numbers to overwhelm our defenses. The human attacks were not random. Each assault was carefully coordinated to maximize damage while minimizing human casualties. They had learned to avoid Corvanian strengths while exploiting every weakness. They're not just brave, Vexthul observed. They're smart. They figured out how to fight a technologically superior enemy by using tactics we've never encountered. Final humiliation came when human forces, led by Major Alan Thompson, successfully destroyed the main Corvanian supply depot using nothing but improvised weapons and superior planning. The humans had somehow infiltrated the most secure facility in the alien fleet and planted explosives that crippled the entire invasion force. How did they get past our security? Vexthul demanded. They didn't fight their way in, Thompson's interrogation revealed. They convinced some of our own troops to help them. They're using psychological warfare to turn our forces against each other. The humans had somehow learned to exploit Corvanian psychology. They understood that alien soldiers were trained to follow orders without question, and they had found ways to give those soldiers false orders that served human purposes. They're not just fighting our bodies, Vexthul realized. They're fighting our minds. The reports showed human forces had captured several Corvanian officers and convinced them to provide tactical information. The humans didn't use torture or threats. They used logic and persuasion to make the aliens believe that cooperation was in their best interest. They're turning our own people against us, Kraltos said. They're making us doubt our own mission. Vexthul looked at the casualty reports. The Corvanian Empire had lost over 60% of the invasion force. The survivors were demoralized, scattered, and running low on supplies. The humans had turned what should have been a simple conquest into a grinding war of attrition. We're not fighting soldiers, Vexthul concluded. We're fighting an entire species that has evolved for warfare. Every human, from infant to elder, is part of a vast military machine. The communication device crackled with an urgent message from High Command. Commander Vexthul, report your status immediately. Vexthul stared at the blue planet that had become his nemesis. The humans were still fighting, still learning, still adapting. They showed no signs of surrender or defeat. High Command, he replied, I recommend immediate withdrawal. The humans are not a species we can conquer. They are a species we must avoid. For the first time in Corvanian history, a superior alien force was being defeated by primitive technology and unlimited human determination. Commander Vexthul sat in the emergency council chamber aboard the last functioning Corvanian command ship. Around the table, His surviving officers looked like broken soldiers. Their eyes held something Vexthal had never seen in Corvanian warriors before: fear. "Report casualties," Vexthal ordered. Captain Mordak consulted his datapad with shaking hands. 68% of our forces are dead, wounded, or missing. Of the remaining ships, only 43 are combat ready. We have lost 7 dreadnoughts, 34 cruisers, and over 100 smaller vessels. The numbers struck the room like physical blows. The Corvanian Empire had never suffered such losses in any previous conquest. Most species surrendered after losing 10% of an invasion force. "What about ground forces?" Vexthal asked. "Worse," Mordak replied. 75% casualties. The survivors are requesting immediate evacuation. Morale has collapsed. Completely. Sub-Commander Thargoz entered the chamber, his armor scorched and his breathing labored. He had just returned from the planet's surface with the last evacuation shuttle. "Commander," Thargoz said, "I must report on the human tactics. They are not fighting like any species in our database." Vexthal gestured for him to continue. "The humans have learned to predict our every move." A human strategist named Colonel Patricia Davis led an attack that destroyed 3 of our remaining ground bases. She somehow knew exactly when and where our reinforcements would arrive. The tactical display showed the battle. Human forces had positioned themselves in perfect ambush locations hours before Corvanian troops arrived. The aliens had walked directly into carefully planned traps. "How does she do this?" Vexthal demanded. "She has studied our military doctrine." Thargoz explained. "Humans learn from every engagement. They have identified patterns in our behavior and are using this knowledge to stay one step ahead." The intelligence officer activated a recording of human communications. The voice belonged to Admiral Sandra Lewis, the human fleet commander who had somehow managed to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. "All units execute Pattern 7, Lewis commanded. "The aliens will attempt to regroup at coordinates 12 Alpha. Be ready." The recording showed human forces moving into position, exactly where Corvanian ships would arrive 6 hours later. When the alien vessels dropped out of hyperspace, they found themselves surrounded by human fighters using modified Corvanian weapons. "They are using our own technology against us," the intelligence officer reported. "But they have improved our designs. Human engineer Robert Kim has made our weapons 30% more efficient." Vexthal studied the technical analysis. The humans had not just copied Corvanian technology. They had somehow made it better. Their modifications showed understanding of alien engineering principles that should have taken decades to learn. "How long did they study our equipment?" Vexthal asked. "Less than 3 weeks," came the reply. "They reverse-engineered our most advanced systems in the time it takes us to file a supply requisition." The final battle report came from the defense of the Corvanian flagship Eternal Glory. Human forces led by Captain Steve Johnson had somehow infiltrated the most secure ship in the fleet, using nothing but captured maintenance pods and civilian spacecraft. "Johnson's team fought through 12 levels of security," reported the ship's captain. "They used improvised weapons and tactics we had never encountered. When they reached the reactor core, 3 humans stayed behind to ensure the others could complete their mission." The security footage showed the final moments. A human soldier named Private Tony Martinez, mortally wounded and surrounded by Corvanian guards, had used his last strength to activate explosives that destroyed the ship's main reactor. As he died, he smiled and spoke words that would haunt. "Vexthal forever. Tell your people," Martinez had said, "humans don't know how to quit." The explosion had destroyed the Eternal Glory and forced the evacuation of the entire Corvanian command structure. The most powerful ship in the fleet had been brought down by one dying human who refused to surrender. "Commander," Lieutenant Kraltos said quietly, "High Command is demanding an explanation. How did a primitive species defeat our forces?" Vexthil looked at the data streaming across his screens. Every report told the same story. The humans fought with a combination of intelligence, determination, and sheer bloody-minded stubbornness that no Corvanian strategist had ever imagined possible. "We underestimated them completely," Vexthil admitted. "We thought their primitive technology made them weak. We were wrong." The reports showed human forces continuing to adapt and learn. Even as the Corvanian fleet prepared to retreat, Dr. Richard Hayes had somehow figured out how to track Corvanian ships through hyperspace and was sharing this information with human military forces throughout the galaxy. They are not just defending their home world, Vexthil realized. They are preparing to follow us. The intelligence reports confirmed his worst fears. Human scientists had reverse-engineered Corvanian hyperspace technology and were building their own starships. Within months, they would be capable of interstellar travel. "They will come after us," Kraltos said. "They will not be content with just driving us away." Vexthil began composing his final report to High Command. The document would become required. Reading in every Corvanian military academy, a warning about the dangers of underestimating seemingly primitive species. "Humans do not fight to win," he wrote. "They fight to survive, and they will sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to ensure their species continues. They view death in battle as honorable rather than tragic." The evacuation order came from High Command within hours of receiving Vexthil's report. The remaining Corvanian forces were ordered to withdraw immediately and establish a quarantine zone around the human solar system dot as the last Corvanian ships limped away from Earth. Vexthil watched the blue planet shrink on his view screen. The humans had not just defeated a technologically superior invasion force. They had done something far more dangerous. They had proven that determination and intelligence could overcome any technological advantage. "What will you tell the other species?" Kraltos asked. "The truth," Vexthil replied. "Never fight a species that views death as acceptable and defeat as impossible." Years later, when younger officers asked Vexthil about his experiences fighting humans, he would give them a simple warning that became part of Corvanian military doctrine. "The humans are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy," he would tell them, "not because of their weapons or their ships, but because they fight with their very souls. They do not just wage war, they embody it." The human victory became a legend throughout the galaxy. Every major species quietly added Earth to their never-engaged lists. The humans had earned their place among the stars, not through superior technology, but through the sheer, terrifying force of human will dot in the end. Commander Vexthil learned a lesson that would reshape Corvanian military thinking for generations. Technology without determination was useless, but determination without limits was unstoppable. The humans had both. Earth remained unconquered, and the galaxy took notice. Humanity had announced its presence to the stars in the most unmistakable way possible. They had fought the most powerful military force in known space and won dot from that day forward. No alien species would ever again make the mistake of underestimating the small blue planet and its determined inhabitants. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun.